Welcome to another video on SRID Cloud. In this video, we're going to talk about more on cryptography, particularly about digital certificates. In the previous videos, we talked about secret key cryptography and then the public and private key cryptography and all that. And in each of those cryptographic techniques, the distribution of the keys, in the case of secret key, it is the secret key itself, and in the case of public and private keys, the public key is a challenge, and that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, the systems will collapse very easily. So digital certificates is one such technique to distribute the public key, particularly in the case of the public key and private key cryptography. So in this video, we're going to talk about the secret key cryptography and what exactly is a problem with it, the distribution of it, of course. And then we're going to talk about the public key and private keys, and the distribution of public key is a problem. And there is a solution to this problem as well. And we're going to talk about that in detail. And also, we are going to introduce something very fancy. We're going to be introducing a solution that is a combination of both these cryptographic techniques. And why, we'll talk about that. And then I will talk about digital certificate, how to create it and how to consume it, and so on. So now let's talk about the secret key cryptography. You want to communicate with somebody, and you both come up with a secret key, and either you create it or the other party creates it. You have to make sure the same secret key is available for both the parties. So that means it has to be communicated to the other side. Whoever creates it has to give it to the other person. And while doing that, it should not end up with any other bad guys. Otherwise, the whole system will collapse. So the secret key distribution is a challenge, and how do you do it securely is a problem. And not only that, even if the secret key is distributed to the other party, what guarantee is the other party has that it came from the intended source? There is no way the system in place can guarantee that. But we're going to find a solution, and we're going to talk about that, how to do it securely. So the problems are twofold. One is the distribution of the secret key itself, and second is the authenticity of the secret key. So since there is no guarantee on either one of these two, the third cryptographic assurance, that is the integrity of the data, is also messed up with. So now let's talk about the public key, private key cryptography. And here the public key is created along with the private key, and the private key stays with the person who created it, and the public key is distributed to the other person. And the bad guys can also get a copy of the public key. The public key is, of course, meant for everyone. The bad guys can also have it, but what if they replace it with their own public key and then distribute it to the other end? So if I'm talking to you and you create a public key and private key and then you send your public key to me, the bad guy can always intercept it, and then he can replace your other person's public key with his own, and then I will get a bad public key. So that is a problem. And how to ensure the authenticity of the public key that I got from you, or the other way around. And second, encrypting data with the public key or even private key is very slow compared to the secret key encryption. Because in secret key encryption, since there is only one key in play, it is very easy to encrypt and decrypt. Mathematically, it should be a very straightforward operation. But in the case of public key and private key, encrypting with one and decrypting with the other requires a lot of mathematical operations. In fact, in my previous videos, you must have seen a mathematical operation on how to create these two keys and then how to encrypt your data with it. and then decrypt it. You must have seen the complexity there with modulus mathematics and exponentiation and multiplication and all that. So that is another problem that needs to be handled. So securely distributing public key and securely distributing the secret key, both are problems. And here is a novel way to handle both these problems in one shot, and that is digital certificate. You distribute public key with authentication using digital certificate, and then when the public key is distributed to the other end securely, then use the secret key to communicate with both the parties. That means you have the public key and then you encrypt your secret key with the public key, and then you send it to the other side, and there you have the secret key in between both of you, and then you can use that to communicate with each other. So maybe a little bit confusing to talk about. Let's see how it works in a detailed way. So here is the pictorial representation of what I just said. So in secret key cryptography, it is very risky, and distribution of it is a problem. So let's find another solution here, and that is create the private key and public key and keep the private key and distribute the public key through the digital certificate. How to do that, we will see that in a moment. So once both the parties are happy with the public key distribution, then the parties can encrypt the secret key with the public key, and then both parties can have the secret key, and then the secret key can be used for transmission of data securely between these two parties. So the public key is used only for distributing the distribution of secret key, and I think with this approach the problem of slowness with the public key and private key can be solved, and the distribution of the public key itself is solved with a digital certificate, and I have not explained that yet. So that is what we're going to do next. So let me introduce a term called certificate authority. Certificate authority is an entity whose he has created a public key and private keys and kept the private key himself, and then distributed the public key to the whole world. And it is generally done through standard channels like operating systems, browsers, shrink wrapped software, or whatever. The distribution of the public key of certificate authority is taken for granted, and you need to trust it. Since it is done through proper channels, you don't have to worry about the authenticity and the integrity of the public key of certificate authority. So let's talk about that in detail later on, but for now you have to trust the certificate authority's public key. So once that is taken care of, then let us say, for example, your friend wants to communicate with you securely. Then your friend will create a public key and also a private key, and he or she will keep the private key and will not even distribute it, and will send it to send the public key to the certificate authority. So that is called a request, certificate sign request from your friend to the certificate authority. And in the step number 3, the certificate authority will immediately produce a hash of your friend's public key, and then the certificate authority will encrypt it with the certificate authority's private key. This process is called signing, because if you want to create a secure document, for example, you generally sign it at the bottom with your signature, and the signature is something very personal to you, and only you can reproduce a similar signature every time. So that is equivalent to private key here. So the certificate authority will create a hash of your friend's public key, and then will encrypt or sign that data with the certificate authority's private key. So why hashing? The same problem that we talked earlier. Hashing produces lesser data, let us say you have a huge public key, and the hash of that will be very smaller. So it is easier and quicker to encrypt it or sign it with the private key. So with the signing of the your friend's public key done, now let's go to step number 4. Certificate authority will create a package, and the package will contain 2 sections in it. The top section will contain your friend's public key as is, along with some other information like his name and organization and all that. And in the bottom half will contain the this hashed and encrypted or signed version of the your friend's public key with the certificate authority's private key. So these two are put together into what is called a digital certificate. So certificate authority will create this package, and they can either distribute it to the whole world on behalf of your friend, or they can give it to your friend, and your friend can distribute it to whoever they want to communicate with. So this is how a digital certificate is created. Now, after getting the digital certificate, how can you consume it? How can you extract something out of it, your friend's public key actually, and then use it to communicate with your friend? How to do that? That is in the next step. So here the first step is you need to have some trust in the certificate authority's public key, as I described earlier. So you have to somehow get the public key of the certificate authority, and there are ways to do that through operating system that you have on your computer, or the browser that you're using for performing the trusted secure transactions, or sometimes when you install a shrink wrapped software, the certificate authority's public key will come with that. So with the certificate authority's public key in your place, you then receive the digital certificate from your friend, either from your friend directly or through the certificate authority, and you unpack it. So as I said earlier, the certificate will have 2 sections in it. The top section contains your friend's public key, and the bottom section contains a signed copy of the hash of the your friend's public key. So you unpack it, and then you divide them into 2. And then in the step number 3, you decrypt the bottom portion of the certificate's authorities. You decrypt the bottom portion with the certificate authority's public key. So you have it, and when you do that, you'll get the hash of your friend's public key. And in step number 4, since you already have your friend's public key, that is the top portion of the certificate, you independently create a hash or digest of that, and then compare that hash with the output from the step number 3. If they two match, that means the certificate was actually produced by the certificate authority. In other words, the certificate contains a public key, and that is encrypted or signed through hashing with the help of the certificate authority's private key. So now, with this operation completed, in step number 5, you can be assured that you have a very valid public key of your friend, and you can communicate with your friend securely. So these 2 steps, you need to understand these 2 better if you want to have an understanding of cryptography through digital certificates. On one side is the creation of the digital certificates, and as I explained, the steps, and the second half is the consumption of it, and this is how you consume the digital certificate. So now the public key of the certificate authority, that needs to be communicated to the rest of the world, and that is also done through similar concept of a digital certificate. But there is a difference. In the certificate authority's certificate, which is otherwise called root certificate or self-signed certificate, the top half will contain the certificate authority's public key, and the bottom half will contain the hash and encryption of the same with certificate authority's private key. So in other words, the bottom half will contain the hash of certificate authority's public key and signed with certificate authority's private key. So what does it mean? When you receive such a root certificate or self-signed certificate, how can you validate it? You cannot, because it is not signed by someone else. So the root certificate, the self-signed certificate, never gets validated, and you assume that it is valid as is. So that is why it has to be transmitted to you through proper channels like operating systems or shrink-wrap softwares or browsers and etc. So now back on this, your friend's public key is with you now, and it is secure, and you know it came from your friend. Now what happens next? Now it is time for you to start communicating with your friend. Can you do that with the public key? You can do that. The public key of your friend, yes, you can certainly do that. But as I said earlier, encrypting data with a public key will take long time, and the decryption of the same with the private key by your friend will also take long time. So what is the solution to this problem? With the help of the public key as a one-time activity, you distribute the secret key that you create for your friend. So the secret key, there's only one key. There are no two keys at all. There's only one key, and you encrypt such a secret key with your friend's public key, and then you transmit along the wire to the other end, and your friend can decrypt it and then have the secret key. So this is a one-time activity, so even though it is very, very slow, it does not matter. You encrypt the secret key with your friend's public key, and your friend decrypts it with his or her private key. Will take some time, but that's okay because it's done only once. So now both of you have the secret key, and you start communicating with each other with the help of the secret key. So you want to send something, a file, to your friend, you can always encrypt it with your secret key, and your friend can decrypt it with the same secret key because the secret key is now shared. So this scheme seems to be a very clever method of using both secret key and the public key and private key cryptography together. So now this is something I mentioned already, the certificate authority's public key. So how do you have it? And it is generally done through proper channels like browsers and operating systems and shrink-wrap software, etc. So these certificates are called root certificates and also called self-signed certificates, and as I explained a moment ago. And if you want, you can create your own root certificates. You don't have to depend on a certificate authority to do that. So you can create your own root certificate, and you can distribute it along with your software. So your software is generally distributed through proper channels. So your clients will have your public key, and then you can, just like in the previous examples, a certificate authority issued a certificate on behalf of your friend. Your software can issue other certificates on behalf of the other entities in your software, in your application. So now there are three interesting scenarios. One of them is already, we talked about it, the browsers and operating systems and so on will contain the root certificate. But what if you want to create your own root certificate? What if you want to create your own higher level certificate that can issue other certificates? How to do that? The X509 and OpenSSL provides toolings to do that, and in a separate video next I will go through very specific steps on how to create such a root certificate, how to issue the certificate on behalf of others, and how to consume it, how to use it to communicate with data, and so on. There's another issue to be addressed, and that is, what if the certificate authority's private key itself is compromised? Then the certificate authority would like to revoke all certificates generated so far and then regenerate them and then send it across to whoever got the original certificate earlier. So the X509 and OpenSSL provides facilities to maintain the certificate revocation management, and we are going to see how to do that as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and very soon I will be producing the other video on X509 and OpenSSL, and that will have less theory and more practice. I'm going to show you the exact commands used to create certificates and create public keys and private keys, how to encrypt the data, how to decrypt the data, how to sign it, how to hash it, how to consume the public key once it is distributed, and so on. So that video should be coming very, very shortly for your convenience. So it was a pleasure producing this video for you, and I will talk to you all in very shortly, in a few days, with another video. Have a wonderful evening and a wonderful day if you are watching it early in the morning, and bye for now.